So affective computing, the power of emotions and analytics, or artificial intelligence applied towards emotions. Two very near and dear things to my heart. AI, it's something I've spent the majority of my professional and academic career pursuing. Emotions, something my girlfriend wishes I was better at. You can email me with any questions at zavain.dar@luxcapital.com. You can tweet me at zavindar. Supposedly, thought leadership is a big thing in VC. Okay, that's all. Okay. So what is affective computing? It's technology that knows how you feel. And kind of from input to output, what does that look like? It means that it digests data about you. We're going to talk about what that type of data is. It processes that data. That's usually where the AI or the data analytics come in. And then it does something with that analytics, right? It either displays it or it manipulates it or it mimics it. The background, I guess a long, long time ago, there was this guy named Carl. And he was one of the first people to really say, hey, what are emotions and how do we quantify them? How do we create an ontology, an atlas, a map of them? But really for a long time, he was alone. And that's probably why the picture's in black and white. Moving forward, Paul Ekman, who's actually a luminary in the field, was really the first guy to plant a fat flag in the ground and say, you know what, we're going to take this seriously. And we're going to do these things called action units. And action units is essentially dividing the face up into quantifiable, discrete bits and treating those as independent of other bits. And if we do that, then we can start putting algorithms on top of those kind of discrete faces or discrete portions of your face to create an atlas of emotions. One of the interesting things that he also figured out then, and I think this will be something that Rana and the rest of the kind of panel discusses, is that emotions are uniform across everybody, across cultures, across countries, probably across time. They're probably evolutionary founded. Finally, Rosalind Picard really invented the term affective computing with a book in 1997. Creatively called Affective Computing. She also started the Media Lab group on affective computing. Before we move forward, let's do a quick thought experiment. When we talk about digitizing emotions, the philosopher in me was kind of driven by, what are emotions? We kind of have these vocabularies, and the vocabularies do change from culture to culture. There are terms in Chinese, in Urdu, in Spanish, that don't necessarily exist in English. There are terms in East Palo Alto that don't exist at Stanford, right? And that's funny, but it's also true, and it shows just how hard of a task we're really dealing with, right? And so when we try to quantify these things, I think one of the most important things and one of the most exciting things right now is now that we have these data sets, we don't need to necessarily rely on the old reductionist models or the old kind of not data-driven, but more kind of I'm smart and I can figure this out on my own type of models that Paul Ekman and Carl came up with back in the day, where it was really just humans kind of sitting down and thinking long and hard about what are the 1,000 emotions that people have. Why is that interesting, and what does basketball have to do with that? We all know basketball, and you guys, I won't be insulted if anyone screams, when the Warriors win later tonight. People have generally thought there are 5 positions in basketball. Similarly to maybe people thought once upon a time there are 7, general human emotions. It turns out that when you take basketball data and, chug it through some fancy AI algorithm, there's something more like 13 positions that naturally emerge in different clusters, right? And an interesting thought experiment here is what happens when you look at all the different data that we have about ourselves and what type of emotions can we draw, and do our vocabularies necessarily map to those semantic spaces? That's the only original bit I had. So hopefully that was interesting. OK. Capturing pop culture imagination. So this was really AI 1.0 or affective computing 1.0. All these robots were seen as really dumb, really silly. They could play chess like God, but they couldn't figure out when someone's feelings were hurt, right? And now we're kind of in this new era, right, where I've seen her in Lux or Ex Machina. I haven't seen Chappie yet. But really, we're starting to see affective computing, or the ability of a computer to read human emotions, as the final step towards strong AI, right? It's really the bridge that we need to pass. particularly in Ex Machina, it's actually, that's part of the Turing test that's presented, right? So why now? Why is this interesting? And as a VC, this is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. So it's maturing distributed platforms, Hadoop, Cloudera, whatever. It's novel sensors, right? Suddenly we have iPhones that track our heart rates. We have Google Glass that maybe checks the diameter of our pupils. We have big data, right? These sensors kind of get stored into the maturing distributed platforms. That's where the data is. We have machine learning, and a subset of machine learning is deep learning. Deep learning is interesting, particularly for the type of data that we're using, which is high dimensional. It's topologically very different for us to intuit what the feature spaces look like. And then we have these guys who are really at the cutting edge, the cusp of the research, looking at micro-expressions of what emotions are. And then finally, we have affective computing, companies, research, products, apps. Cheesily enough, they all sit on top of Moore's law. Cool. So what type of data do we have? We have vocal, gestural, facial data, and that's really in the voice and sound, or voice and visual inputs. And then we have physiological data sets. And these are interesting because we don't generally think of these as emotional data sets, or I don't, right? I was kind of, when Josh put these in, I was actually kind of surprised. But it shows how we can use data to really probe and interpret emotions in ways that even we as humans don't necessarily have access to, right? So muscle EMG, skin GSR, brain EEG, and heart EMG. And when we get all of these data sets, we can start treating the multiple modalities into our kind of computing platforms and start to make sense of them. And that's really what a lot of these companies and devices do. So what are applications? I think the most obvious applications, this is something that everyone's going to talk about, are focus groups at scale. What does that look like? I think we can do much more than that too, and that's really what I'm going to hope to push these guys on, along with you guys. So advertising, media, education, negotiation, entertainment, computational propaganda, that's kind of scary. What can we do once emotions are digitized? And what can we do once emotions are commodified in the weird kind of Marxist sense? So applications, this is actually Rana's daughter. This is Rana's daughter learning on Khan Academy. And you can see the computer, the algorithm, is picking up on the daughter's, I'm going to have to apologize for not knowing her name, on her emotions as she's presented different academic concepts. Applications in market research. You can see on the left, and this is again from Rana's slides, you can see on the left and right how you can quantify the difference a priori, pre-facto, what something looks like that goes viral and what something looks like that doesn't go viral with human emotions. It's actually fairly interesting. Once we do get these emotions digitized and quantified, we can start placing those data sets into adjacent disciplines and fields. This is something that I threw up there, and I think there's space for debate about how accurate or how much so this should be here. I think it is interesting. A lot of people are arguing that the field of economics is breaking. Microeconomics is kind of based on these assumptions that people are rational agents. In reality, we're not. We're irrational. Another way to say irrational is that we're emotional, right? And here's some kind of work on that. And finally, once we actually understand what people are feeling, we can manipulate them. And that's scary too, but that's already happening. So the market, if you look at the fourth column from the left, so it's the high level number, there are $32 billion in consumer market research. And beyond that, Josh really wanted me to come up with numbers to kind of probe and give you guys fodder and whet your appetite. I think the reality is that it's too early, and that's why myself as an early stage investor, that's why I'm here. So it's greenfield, it's white space. We can imagine the possibilities, but we don't have numbers yet. And that's why it's risky, but it's also exciting. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Yuval, who has a presentation. So Yuval Moore, make your way up. I believe I have this guy for you.
That would help.
Perfect.
Good afternoon. My name is Yuval Moore, and I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Beyond Verbal. As a Stanford Business School graduate, it's always a pleasure to come back here to the new campus of GSB. I was in the old campus, so I want to thank the VLab team for inviting me to be part of this panel. So a few weeks ago, a good friend of mine is calling me up and saying, hey, I have a free ticket for a basketball game. Would you like to join? And of course, I jumped immediately on the opportunity. And just when I was about to leave, when I'm at the door, my wife is telling me, so where are you going? I'm going with my good friend to see a good basketball game. Is everything okay? To that she replies, no, everything is okay. You can go ahead with your friend. Have fun. So I assume by the laugh here that you all are familiar with this kind of situation one way or the other. The interesting thing here is that the same minute I knew I was in trouble, but I knew I was in trouble not because of what she said. I knew I'm in deep trouble because of the way she said it. And voice carries a lot of information. Voice is a great expression tool. It carries, it delivers words, but it delivers a message that goes way beyond just the pure words. Actually, when you think about it, this is the way babies understand their parents. So if we take as an example a baby, let's say from Brazil, that is being adopted by parents in Israel. The baby, before it can understand any words, before it can even see, the baby will be able to understand whether the adopting parents are happy and relaxed or anxious and stressful. The baby would sense this and would react accordingly. What this means is that there is something that is going in the air, something that basically projects through the tone of voice the emotions of the parents, and the baby can understand this and react accordingly. This also means that this language is universal, as was mentioned before, and it has nothing to do with where the baby was born. I trust you can mean a very powerful and strong message when it's coming from a good friend, or it can mean something completely different when we are talking about a political setting. Over the last few years, starting with Apple's Siri, voice has really become one of the most important connections between humans and devices. Google and Samsung introduced voice controls into a wearable. Voice is also a key element in the new Apple Watch. Even robots, as was mentioned before, even robots start to understand how we are feeling. All of the major tech companies have adopted voice as the new way to add utility and differentiate between products. But they have only scratched the surface of what's possible. Today, machines and personal devices have pretty good understanding, and they can understand pretty much a lot of the things about us. They understand what we type, they understand what we click, they understand where we are with the GPS position, and if we speak good North American English, they even understand what we are saying. Try to see if this will work in Hebrew, and you will get a little bit not that based results. But when it comes to emotions, machines really don't understand what we are feeling right now, and they are completely clueless about our emotions as they are happening. Our proprietary technology is based on over 20 years of research, and we currently have in our database over 1.5 million voice samples covering more than 40 languages. Leading scientists in areas such as physics, neuropsychology, decision-making have discovered the human intonational code. We run our software through rigorous testing and validation process, both internally and externally. And we've also found that this intonational code is really language and culture independent, as I've alluded to before. Now, here is a dilemma for you as entrepreneurs. And we've talked about this with the team, with the panelists before. We very quickly realized that emotions analytics can be extremely transformational, really in a big variety of applications and use cases. Our technology is currently being used in call centers. It's currently being utilized in the market research space by companies such as Unilever. But really, as the panelists will discuss later on, really the big question is where we need to focus our attention. One of the key things that we have made as a company, the key decisions that we've made, and now it's actually being shared by some of the other companies as well, is we've decided that as a startup, we do not want and we cannot go after all these different opportunities that this technology presents, so we needed to create a collaboration platform. And this collaboration platform is our cloud-based API service. What this API service enables us is to hook up and partner with a variety of application developers that now can emotionally power their applications using our technology. So it's a great way for collaboration, and it's a great way to increase the reach of this technology, and this is something that we'll share among the other companies as well. Our business model is based on licensing the technology and on use, as well as the value that we are adding in different applications and use cases, which is why our pricing can be different for use cases like call center or market research or mobile applications. But now, where we see the biggest opportunity for us going forward is actually in the wellness space. We realize that our voice carries a lot of information about our wellness and health. Just think about how many times did you have a chance to say to a close friend or a relative, hey, you don't sound so well, is everything okay? Or even something like, hey, it looks like you need to listen to your body better. Now with emotions analytics, it's actually possible to give this type of capability to devices, and this is where we see a big promise. Today, we live in a world, in a digital health world, that is quickly transforming the way we monitor and track our wellness and our health. There is a shift from sporadic, intermittent visits to the clinic and meetings with the doctors to something that is continuous, ongoing monitoring of our wellness and health using really a big stream of wearable devices. Emotions analytics can add a layer here that will provide continuous, passive, non-intrusive monitoring of our wellness and health in a way that was just not possible to do before. But to make this vision into reality will require an ecosystem that will start with the biosensing devices, then going through the emotion vision analysis that can be provided by companies like Affectiva and Emotient, and going through to the voice analytics, the voice emotion sensing that will be provided by companies like Beyond Verbal. Our emotions analytics, or actually our wellness API, will provide capabilities to listen to what our body has to say by just listening to the tone of voice. We would be able to track, using the voice, wellness and health conditions, and we would be able to monitor and measure where big changes are happening. One last thought to leave you with, which is where this thing is heading, where this will go in the future. Those of you that had the opportunity to see and to listen the Apple Research Kit announcement that took place when Apple launched the Apple Watch, one of the examples that was presented there is that there would be an opportunity to sense your Parkinson's conditions just by analyzing the tone of voice. There is a lot of research that is going on right now that is directly connecting between tone of voice and specific physiological conditions. Now, this would not be an FDA-approved diagnostic tool, but it can be an excellent well-being monitoring tool that can really measure changes and tell you when something is different. So this is where it's heading. We are doing a lot of work in this space as well. Very excited to be here with this panel. Looking forward to a very lively discussion, and I'm sure it will be emotional. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuval. I was texted, in case you guys are curious what this guy is. It's the higher-ups telling me exactly what to say. A few things. One is we have a number for you to text questions to. I believe it will show up on the screen at some point, but in case it doesn't, the number is 650-308-8522. Operators are waiting. You can also share on Twitter, #VLabAC. And please keep the iPad open for, I'm just kidding. I realize I also never mentioned what the hell Lux Capital is. We're an early stage deep tech fund split in Menlo Park in New York. We have roughly 700 million under management. We have 4 funds. And you can think of us as the guys who do cool, wonky, crazy things, anywhere from metamaterials and satellites to deep AI and biotech. I'm going to quickly introduce the rest of the panel, minus Yuval, who just had a chance to brilliantly explain beyond verbal. And then actually I will be a guinea pig for Rana to show off her technology, at which point we'll get into the panel. I think this is one of the more active sessions the VLab generally does. On my far left, I have Mary Czerwinski, PhD from Indiana University, has been in industry for over 25 years as a principal research and researcher manager at MSR. I believe she's the one and only academic researcher on the panel. To her right, Ken Denman, who has a very illustrious career as an entrepreneur and executive, taken multiple companies to IPO. He's the president and CEO of Emotient, and also has the coolest blue pants in the auditorium.
He does.
Finally,
really cool.
finally, we have Rana Kaliouby from Egypt. I actually, last night, was reading an amazing New Yorker piece, essentially on Rana. Very, very, very inspiring. PhD from Cambridge, was a researcher at the MIT Media Lab, and now is the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Affectiva. And with that, we will show off her technology.
Try a demo.
And you guys can see how it goes. I think
All right.
we're good to go here. I'll take off my glasses.
So can you hear me? Is my thing on? OK, awesome. So we are going to switch to the iPad. So I have an iPad here that is running our technology. We read facial emotions, and basically, we are going to see if we can read Zavain's facial expressions. So you can
It's
All
very
right.
hard for me
So
not to
first
smile.
give me your poker face, best poker face. All right, so you can see that the machine has basically found, it's found his face. That's the white bounding box around his face. And then it's tracking the main feature points of his face. So his eyebrows, his eyes, his mouth, his lips. And then as he starts making different facial expressions, exactly. So he smiled, so you can see the smile bar go up. Now that was a big smile. Show me a subtle smile. Yeah, so you can see how the technology can capture.
I'm a very binary person.
Try an eyebrow raise, which is a strong indicator of surprise. Yeah, you've got great eyebrows, so it works really well. Brow furrow. Yep, that's great. Frown it's hard to do on demand. It's like a sad face. I don't know. Kind of, yeah.
Trying to be mad at the iPad right now.
So valence is a very important measure of emotion. It's how positive or negative your emotional experience is. So if you do a positive emotion, the valence bar should turn green. Awesome. Now show me one of your negative emotions, like it's gross, like you're, I don't know, looking at something really gross or disgusting, or you're angry. More. Come on.
Just need to take myself to another place.
Right. Gross.
No. Come on. That was good.
Right.
I can't do that.
It's hard to do it on demand. But basically, it captures the different facial expressions and maps it to a number of emotional states. Yeah, you kind of got that. Okay, and then one of the main use cases, or one of the primary use cases where this technology is used today, is to understand how we respond to content. And so we're going to show you an ad, Zavain.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't want you to have seen this ad before, so.
This is all live. This is real.
This is real.
Okay.
Welcome aboard, folks. Just go ahead and take any empty seat that you see.
I hope it's not contagious. So I do have it. When your mom wakes up, can you tell her about me?
That's good.
Awesome. So you had high emotional engagement. Obviously, there were a lot of expressions here. And you can see the real-time, moment-by-moment emotional journey that Zavain had. And imagine we can do this over hundreds or thousands of people and aggregate it and kind of get an understanding of what men like, what women like, and so on. I guess we're going to talk more about that during the panel. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for being my guinea pig.
That's cool. To kick off the panel, I thought I'd pass it along to Mary, the one academic researcher here, and let you kind of spearhead or set a foundation for ineffective computing. Talk a little bit about your, almost entrepreneurial pseudo, and it really is entrepreneurial because this field is only evolving and becoming a thing now.
Yeah.
Talk about that journey there, what you're doing now, and where you hope it will be 10 years from now.
Okay.
And let's get started there.
All right. Well, I've only been working in this area for about 4 years, so I'm clearly the least expert of this panel, but I am a psychologist by training, so I feel like I've kind of come back to my roots. What my group started with was actually stress. It was such a ubiquitous problem, and the more I read about the stress literature, the more stressed out I started getting, because it causes so many problems, cardiovascular problems, stomach problems. It can kill you, basically. And the more I read about it, the more determined I became to try to help people understand their stress levels. It turns out that people are very it's unnatural for them to think about their emotional state. People are not used to doing it, and they really don't have the tools. If you show people that they're stressed, they don't really have the tools to actually do something about that. Just like when I was reading the literature and I felt myself getting stressed, but I really didn't know how to calm myself down. And so what we focused on from the very beginning was not necessarily the sensing side of it, which you guys are all so good at. We had to get there. We had to get good at it, but really what you do about it. So we started showing you your own signals. Maybe you're stressed. And then we focused on the hard human-computer interaction problem, which is how do we give you tools that are actually fun, that you'll actually use, and it's sticky, that actually help you get better. And our very first studies showed that longitudinally we can actually reduce your perceived stress and teach you positive coping skills in a fun social media way. And I can talk a little more about that, but I don't want to take up too much time. So that's how I got started.
Great, and actually, continuing on that thread, I was talking to Mary yesterday, and she had a hilarious, on one side, and an actually very kind of empowering story of a debate with her boyfriend.
Who's here in the audience?
She has happily volunteered to tell everybody about.
Yes,
Share that
yes,
just so we can see
yes.
these kind of almost visceral products that are within our reach.
Yes, okay.
For these guys
So
to then go implement.
we would use Affectiva bracelets and heart rate monitors and monitor our own stress levels. And we had a small circle of friends that we'd share our stress levels and depression levels with. So colleagues of mine knew when I was getting stressed out, but also my boyfriend, I had him opt in. And there was a ride we were taking up to Whistler to go skiing, and we got in a big argument. I mean, it was a big argument. And right when it hit the apex, where I thought, you know, I'm going to turn their car around and go back home, he got a little notification on his phone. Hey, your friend Mary isn't feeling so well. You might want to reach out. And we started laughing so hard. And to this day, we don't remember what the argument was about. It was gone immediately. I think a more endearing story is we built products for parents of ADHD kids, and we had them wear the bracelets, and we taught them to recognize some pictures that we would just show on the wall that would remind them about positive coping skills that they could mirror for their children when their children got upset. And in a similar way, just in time, when the system found that they were getting very highly aroused, we would remind them with a picture, an image of how they should behave. And when we did it just in time, when we got it right at the right time, it was so empowering for them that many of the parents are still using the application 2 years later. So I think that's a little bit more inspiring story.
Great. And one of the interesting things about your story, particularly the products that you're working on, is that they almost seem diametrically, not necessarily diametrically, but they're, you know, in stark contrast to some of the stuff that Ken's working on, right? Which is where once we digitize, quantify, and understand our emotions, then we can treat it as currency and kind of improve product iteration cycles, increase the throughput of, viral videos, of trailers that work well. So Ken, tell us a little bit about, again, your journey to where you are, what you're working on, and where you want Emotient to be, 2 years from now.
Sure. Well, first of all, the pants are a gift from my daughter will be 25 on the 31st next month, and she has been telling me that I don't have enough color in my life. And so this was my Christmas presents, and I like them. I'm sorry. So thanks for that. Thanks for indulging me. I ran a couple of public companies, and I kind of finished with that, and was thinking about what do I want to do with my time? What's going to be really, really fun? What would really cause me to want to get out of bed and really go chase something? And I was working with my partner, Seth Nyman, who's VC, and thinking about what's inevitable. What are the inevitable things? What are going to be next? And when you're thinking about inevitable, you can identify things that feel inevitable, but you kind of got to get the timing right. That's always where the risk is. And we really felt there was something big that was going to happen in this largely effective computing space, with the enablers really kicking in around processing power and camera technology and just things moving to mobile. There's just a lot of forces coming together very, very, very rapidly. And I think we were right on the timing, by the way. And so, we found a team of people who knew way more about this than we did, and at the University of California, San Diego, and convinced these team of 6 PhDs, colleagues of these kinds of folks, just really, really bright people, to come and go on this journey with us. Research professors who wanted to go off and get their product, productize their technology and take it to market. And that's where I thought I could help. So we went on this journey, and fundamentally the thing that really excites me is the opportunity, in addition to the sort of controlled environments, folks, and all this kind of stuff, is the opportunity to go in the wild. Someone once said, if you want to understand how tigers really behave, you don't go to the zoo. You go to all those places where they live in their natural habitat. And in many respects, I felt that's the opportunity, is to be able to go to all the places where consumers are consuming product, content, media, a consumer experience, whatever, and be able to understand what they like and what they don't like fast enough such that product developers could iterate and really give us what we want. And the challenge that we're all trying to overcome is the fact that we don't necessarily tell people what we mean. There's myriad reasons for that, all the isms, you know, and so it's tough for product developers to, you know, to solve those problems. And I do think, you know, as I think it was Wanamaker said, 50% of my advertising dollars are wasted. I just don't know which 50%. Well, we know. We know what 50% are wasted. But there's myriad other, as Yuval has talked about, there's myriad other places that we can add value. Fundamentally, the currency around advertising and market is going to change dramatically. We're going to be part of that. But if you go to healthcare, if you go to education, if you go to robotics, there's going to be huge impacts. As entrepreneurs, the hardest thing to do is to say, where am I going to focus first? And that's what we are all doing. That's what I'm doing. We're focused on some fairly narrow areas first, but we're going to put points on the board, and pretty soon people are going to realize the power of what can happen, and this thing is going to fly in many, many directions.
And not to be the ironic VC Luddite on the stage, as we present this, you know, technology that really is on the cusp of what's possible, it's sitting on disparate technology stacks that are really only now maturing. We suddenly have this sword that's really, really powerful. And you know, to your point, we can suddenly deploy it in the wild. One of the stories that Ken was saying yesterday that I found fascinating was how, you know, for advertising kind of sessions, we kind of know which ads work really, really well, and then we know which ads are, you know, flops. And you can look at, you know, consumers in homes watching those ads and see their kind of reactions. But there's this whole kind of, you know, call it 5th percentile to 95th percentile of ads that are noisy. We don't know really how to assess their efficacy, right? And when you take something like Emotient and deploy it in, you know, your neighborhood dive bar, you suddenly get this kind of increased variance and are able to really assess its effectiveness. That's interesting and fascinating. It's also a little bit scary for some of us, right? And I don't know, Rana, you've actually, you know, directly kind of faced these issues with your company. Talk a little bit both about how you think about it, your own philosophy, but then how you outwardly address it.
The opt-in and privacy?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Affectiva, when we first started over 5 years ago, you know, there was 3 of us, we sat around a table and we talked about what's important to us as a company. And, you know, emotions are very personal. They're one of the most personal things we as people own. And we agreed that as a team, we're gonna respect that. And so we decided that everything we do is gonna be on an opt-in basis. And so 5 years later, we have collected data from 2.8 million faces from 75 countries around the world. That amounts to about 12 billion emotion data points. So it's data that we have, you know, we as humans have never had before, and it's an amazing opportunity to really understand how we as humans express ourselves, you know, gender differences, age differences, cultural differences. But we really stuck to the core of allowing people to opt in. So when you're sent a URL and you're asked to watch an ad, you're very explicitly told that the camera's gonna turn on. If you're okay with it, you turn it on. If you're not, you know, you don't. And then the data, you know, and the data on the mobile device, for example, we were not recording any of the face videos. It was all happening on the device. Sometimes we do send the data to the cloud, which helps with all the deep learning, so it's quite important for us. But then again, you know, we're very upfront with everybody who's opted in. And it's usually just seen by the algorithms, like, you know, we have so much data now that as a team, we don't actually watch those videos anymore. And one final thing I'll say about that is I feel that as a team, as a collective team, it's our responsibility to educate the public, like what's possible and what's not possible with this data. In the end, it's your facial expressions, which, you know, we're all used to seeing and understanding, so.
And to support that point, I wanted to just mention that we are recording the audience right now.
And you weren't told.
And a little bit later, assuming we get enough uplink bandwidth, we're going to show you from our platform how you responded to certain segments of the conversation today.
What panelist was the most popular?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But I completely support Rana's view. We as well, you know, privacy is important. It's something that has to be respected and you should be thoughtful about and requires due care all the time. Especially and particularly in those places where people have an expectation of privacy, whether it's in healthcare or on a device, anything where it's a personal device, and especially if you're personalizing something, if there's personal information, absolutely. Now by definition, we also are chasing in the wild. So without our camera here, you're also on camera elsewhere. Whenever you're in a public setting, you're on camera for the most part in this day and age. One of the things we felt was very important is we created our technology in a way that we do not have to keep the images. So we're all about anonymized aggregate analysis. So in a 4K video, in a basketball game, we can pick up hundreds of faces real time and process them. Once we process the face, we discard the images. And of course, there's no way to identify who those people are. We're not interested. There's no real value in the information of any single individual. But it's very valuable to know how large groups of people react to content and media, specifically if you can also do the demographics, gender, relative age range, ethnicity even. So this is a really important area. The millennials move faster than any of us, but that doesn't eliminate or minimize the need of due care. And so it's an important thing for our whole industry.
So one of the last question that I'll poke here, and then we can move on to brighter and greener fields. I'm a strong believer that generally technologies that are seen as creepy at time 0 are accepted at time 5, right? And maybe while it may be the norm and the status quo to say, hey, look, this is a technology, and we're treating it as an opt-in mechanism, the reality is we're one startup away that says, you know what, fuck it, we're like about to go under, and we will not have everybody opt in, at which point, just to maintain a level playing field, everyone else needs to kind of go there. Do you guys see that happening? If so, when? And if it's anonymized, does it matter?
Well, it does. I'm sorry, I'll be really quick.
Sure.
That single startup that goes down that path will only matter if they deliver enough value to the market that it offsets the risk that people perceive. And at the point at which that relationship tips, then you have what's happened with us with credit cards. On the internet, if you think 10 years ago, 12 years ago, most of us would never think of putting our credit card on the internet. Today, even with all of the breaches that we've had in the last few months, we still have our credit cards in some kind of internet relationship. So we've decided that the benefit that we get in convenience and productivity offsets that risk.
So, one point I wanted to bring up is with regards to the value. And, while it's always very interesting and we're always interested to kind of know what other people are feeling, and this is kind of the most natural thing for us to think about. Actually, most of us, even men, are pretty good at understanding other people's emotions, maybe with you being the exception. But what we are not very good at is to understand our own emotions. So I think where we will see a lot of the value that will be created is in this whole quantified self in personal feedback. I want to tell you that we have our own application that I showed to you in the past called Moody's, and just the ability to use it when I prepare to give an important presentation and to be able to see, to have like a speaking mirror that says, hey, you sound a little bit rough or not happy or anxious versus much more relaxed. The sooner I get, the closer I get to the actual presentation and I feel more comfortable, I think this is where people will see a lot of the value.
And also the real value is when you can see that over time. And then when you pair it with what you were doing, you can actually see, wow, whenever I do this, once a month, I feel really bad. Maybe I shouldn't be doing that anymore. Or whenever I'm with this person, I'm not in such a great mood afterwards. So maybe I shouldn't see that person anymore. So it's the value is over time, because we forget our emotions pretty quickly. In one study I did, people told me they forgot their emotions within about 24 hours. So seeing your own emotions over a long period of time can be really helpful.
This is, yeah. So, the example we give a lot with the wearables is, imagine you would get a message that says, hey, you sound a lot more stressed this week than your average over the last 2-3 months. Mm-hmm. Should you go to a yoga session or, exercise at the gym, or like we were talking about, using machine learning to see what will give you a better feeling. But this whole thing about monitoring the changes over time would be extremely valuable.
So here's a naive and possibly blunt question. Why hasn't one of these consumer-facing apps or products taken off? Why have I? Maybe they have, and I'm just I haven't heard of them. Where are they? And when do they kind of hit you guys?
So I think a lot of our focus, again, as an industry over the past few years, was to get the sensing algorithms so that they can work in the wild, right? So that you could stand on stage with all the lighting and it can still track your face. Yep. Or you could, pick up a phone and it can track the, the emotions in your voice. Now that we've got the sensing, I think, down, it's when we can begin to explore the different applications. And I think collectively as an industry, we've packaged our technologies as SDKs and APIs so that other developers can get building and get creative.
And
so maybe soon.
And at the same time, and we've talked about it, I think that the way to scale is using APIs and SDKs. Yet I think that it will be almost our responsibility, and this is what we've been doing as a company, is to realize that we need to spark the imagination of people using just different applications that initially we would either develop or encourage in order to get people to even think what's possible.
What's that initial application you're working on?
So, with Moody's, the one that I was telling you, it was downloaded in over 160 countries. Wow. And even though we use it primarily as a demonstration and a business development tool, we are still getting people contacting us and say, hey, can we use it commercially even though it's free of charge for coaching? Mm-hmm. Can we use it when we train, actors? So you see a variety of use cases just from this application, but now we have people that are using our API in dating applications, in cases of sales training. We have a company that integrated our solution with the whole sales training, and they wanted to show to the people that are coming for the training how they sound before and after and how they come across to their customers. So I think we'll see more and more of this.
I'll throw at least one out. I think if you go to the large in the wild space, increasingly we see big digital screens at all of the arenas that we go to, massive things. I mean, just huge. And of course, this is a way to provide digital media to turn over the media to get a lot of ad space in front of a significant crowd. Historically, the rate cards for those events have been basically butts and seats, so based on the attendance. But the ability to measure affect, to measure, establish a baseline of attention and engagement, and then track standard deviations away from that, and literally charge prime time. So basically, 125% for standard deviation above the baseline, 150% above that, 200%. You could lift. We can lift advertising revenue in these venues significantly by delivering viewability and verifying it. And so that's an example, a real world example, something we're working on right now, with the Golden State Warriors as an example, but really kind of focusing on the whole NBA, and it'll go other places, of how the dynamic around how the currency of media and advertising and marketing is going to change, sponsorships, because again, if you can measure it, you can perform against it, you can audit it, you can get paid for it. And so when I talk about changing currency in the industry, It's not just in traditional advertising, but it's in other sort of digital out-of-home environments as well.
Shifting gears a little bit, and before going to the audience questions, do you guys have the number up there? Should I say it again? It's up there? Perfect. Oh, it's also on your, the sheet, the flyer that everyone has. I think a general theme is that this is really a new technology emerging, and there's many, many, many different applications of it. One of the scary things as an entrepreneur who's working on a new technology is explaining it to users, to buyers, to consumers, and to folks like me, VCs, investors. Rana, I think you actually started your company first, so you may have had the most difficult path, raising investor capital and explaining what the hell you were working on. Give a little bit of the story there.
Sure. So we were technology at MIT Media Lab at the Affective Computing group. I was working with Professor Roz Picard, who kind of coined the term. And we realized, I think the challenge for us was, as a small research team, we realized there were so many applications of this technology. And at some point we were like, okay, we walked into our Media Lab director's office and we were like, we need like 10 more research assistants. And he said, nope, it's time to spin out. The tipping point for me personally was realizing that this is an opportunity to change how we interact with machines and how we connect and communicate with one another. And so I decided to make the jump from academia to business. And we started, we started raising money. For us, the challenge was focus. Because there are so many applications. A lot of the VCs we pitched this to were like, what's the killer app here? And I actually think the killer app, there's no one killer app. The killer app is having an emotion chip that's embedded on all our devices and is just kind of monitoring our emotions and acting on it.
Were VCs willing to take for granted that the technology wasn't snake oil?
Yeah, I mean, we had prototypes coming out of MIT. That was not the problem.
Yeah.
So we raised money. So now, we're 5 years in. We've raised $20 million from VCs. For example, Kleiner Perkins is one of our VCs. We've also raised money from WPP, which is a market research conglomerate. They're both strategic investors and also our biggest clients. So we do a lot of market research work with them. The challenge for us as a company is I feel like we're doing a lot of work in the advertising space, but we realize as a team that there's a lot more applications. And so the challenge for us is to find a vehicle to make these applications come true.
I also think it's going to be important for users of this kind of technology to have some viewability into why the system's reacting the way that it is. Mm-hmm. So when we start getting into the space where there's sentient beings interacting with us, virtual beings, it's going to be really important when your agent responds in a very happy way that you know why the agent was responding that way. And I think early efforts are basically going to show the user, here's why, in a list, or some kind of nice visualization of what the system is thinking about you right now and why, what the context is, and maybe what meta features you're using. But it's not that easy to show a user why a machine is doing what it's doing. I will tell you that when the machine, it seems in my research, when the agent is happy, it's almost universally good. So neutral to happy is good. I don't think you want it to be too negative or too calm, but I think the user has to have some glance at why the system's doing what it's doing.
This is actually an interesting point because Rana and Zavain experienced this up here, where Rana was asking Zavain to mimic a particular expression, and he was having some difficulty mimicking it. And I need to tell you, there are a lot of actors and actresses who have that same problem. They believe they're mimicking, and the systems, which are deep machine learning based, they've learned these muscle movements of the face that are fired by stimulus, and it's kind of the real thing. And so we may think that we are giving a particular expression as generating our own emotions or understanding our own emotions, as Yuval said, is really the toughest thing. And so we can believe that we're sort of, in a certain state, and we're not, it's not on our face, and we'll say to the computer, you're lying, or you're wrong,
Yeah,
you don't
there is
work.
that danger, yeah. We actually just wired up our team and we all played poker together last Friday. And that was
No
really
way.
good. So people who thought they had really good poker faces, absolutely did not. I know I don't, and that was true. But some of the guys were very surprised.
So I think just to address your question about investors, I think that when you are at the forefront of the technology, and before you have like the killer app, because I don't think that there is one specific killer app, there is this wave of this whole emotions analytics that is really happening, but it requires investors that can understand the vision, can see the picture and can say, okay, we are here for the long run, and we can understand where this is going and feel comfortable with this, because it will not be immediately generating revenues or have the killer app and so on. So I think it requires certain types of
Which is why we really should take our hat off to Rana, because you were out there in the forefront early, and you really, I mean, that's the toughest time to get out in front and convince people that there's really a road in this space.
And you also have a lot of responsibility, so because we are following behind you.
But there's a shift, I think, in the space. Like, I think people now recognize that emotions are important, whereas when I started in this field like over 15 years ago, people were like, emotions? Like, who cares, right? So I think people recognize it's good.
Well, and especially for product design. I mean, knowing how your users are feeling while they're interacting with your technology is huge. And if you can get that in early and iterate on it, it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah. We get this from Unilever a lot when they do the product comparison, and in the wild makes a big difference.
So one of the, actually on Rana first, raising 20 million, 09 onwards post-recession was amazing. I'm sure one of the investor questions you guys all get is around business model, particularly void of the killer app. And I think when investors, at least when I think killer app, I think what will monetize the best. How do you address issues of, hey, your SDK will commoditize, or you have no killer app, or just like go flub a killer app. Just show me a slide that says, hey, advertising will be this much, or computational propaganda will be this much, or boyfriend, girlfriend watches that show your loved one's heartbeat will be this much. What are the different markets, and what vehicles do you have to kind of to highlight them? Yuval.
So we have now a track record in a few of the segments. In call center, we are working with a very large mobile operator in the US. So we can show what is the business model there, which is, as I mentioned before, different from what we are doing in market research. And we can show the traction that we have in market research. But I still believe that the biggest opportunities ahead of us are with things like using the API, especially for wellness tracking over time, and just give this additional layer of information to all these mobile devices and wearable devices out there. So we need to have, and that's what we've been focused on the last 2 years, is to have enough initial indications in the different segments in order to be able to come and say to investors, this is how it will extrapolate.
And one last question before getting to the audience questions. One of the interesting things that's present here is at least between you three, you guys are potentially competitive companies. And not to poke an elephant in the room, how do you think about working together? Is it binary exclusive ors, or is there space for collaboration, multi-modality systems, whatever?
I can take that one because I'm very passionate about this. I actually think that this is a humongous space, and the more we can work together, kind of to evangelize, like we're in evangelism stage where we together want to show that there are opportunities. These are opportunities that are here today. They're in front of us, and the more the more respectful and respectable we each are as players, I think we all win. So I know these guys. We are in conversations all the time, and I think we support each other. So I think that's good.
I think Ken was telling me the exact opposite in the green room. Just kidding.
That's not true.
I'll
then
just give
multimodal
one, one interesting angle that we are facing all the time is that I think these technologies are really complementary. Yeah. So interestingly enough, all these emotions are being generated in the same part of the brain, in the limbic system, in kind of the precognitive part of the brain. Facial expression, hand gestures, body movement, and tone. And at least from our perspective, there are use cases, you're watching an ad or you're driving in a car. If you're not talking, I cannot do anything. I need to have voice as kind of the fuel. And it goes vice versa. When people are starting to talk, then it's harder to get the emotional analysis through the face. So I think that this is really a case of complementary technologies. And one of the things that we're actually talking is maybe to create an industry forum where we bring the different technology providers, the different types of customers, and standardize. So when I am saying one type of valence, what does it mean when other technologies? Yeah. So create kind of a terminology.
Yeah, this is actually this is a real perspective that you're hearing here, and it's possible because we are early. If you think about where the science comes from, the academicians that have been working in the space all know each other, and it's a pretty tight community, and so we come from that basis. My team knows Rana. Rana knows her. Rana knows my team. They go way back, and so there's a basis for a relationship. It's a very big space, as Rana's just pointed out, incredibly big. And the opportunity, for us, it's really about having investors who understand that we are early in a space and they've got to be in it for a longer haul. And of course, we have to get traction in the market. We have to convince people like Zavain eventually to put their money in as well. So the key to the comments that you're hearing are really about validating this space. And we all have a role in validating the space. And then we're going to run like heck. And we're all going to pick areas and segments and verticals that we are best in and that we think we can find the deepest vein of gold to monetize the soonest. And so if we try to boil the ocean, we'll lose. And we're all going to find spaces that we are going to be the best in the world at and grow. And at some point, we'll bump into each other. But I think that'll be sometime down the road when growth slows dramatically across the whole space.
So I think addressing the first audience question, I had on my presentation kind of the slides about cognitive or behavioral economics, the relations to what you guys are working on, and then this potential end outcome of computational propaganda or very high efficacy advertising. What does the world look like where every 13-year-old has 5 soda cans a day because we know exactly what that 13-year-old is thinking and feeling at different times throughout the day? And is there a concern? This isn't the opt-in, opt-out question. This is is this technology too powerful? And how do we address that? I guess, Mary, as the researcher here, you probably have your finger on the pulse better as to what's possible. Yeah, and then we'll let the on the field people talk.
My work is all about helping people feel better and be more healthy, so I would never go there. My concern is that if we give you back your signals for your own reflection and for behavioral change, is it somehow going to hurt you? Maybe we got it wrong. That's what I'm most worried about. But if you get enough signal, you're actually pretty accurate. And our research has shown that you can help people feel better and you can teach them ways to cope with stress or depression or whatever it is. So what I wanted to say at the very beginning is one of the things we found is that one of the reasons these apps aren't taking off right now, the kinds of apps I do, is because they're not fun. People don't like doing psychology. They don't like doing therapy, okay? So one of the things we stumbled upon was if you infuse psychology with some social media and make it more fun, people actually will practice these skills. So instead of just going to Facebook, go to Facebook's timeline and look for 3 things you're thankful for, okay? You were just gonna go there anyway and just graze, in a mind-numbing way. So why not do something that will help you? And so that's kind of what we found, and people actually think the stuff is kind of fun. Now you have to personalize it for the individual user using machine learning, and then you can give users what they really like and what they enjoy. So that's the kind of applications we like to build.
Ken?
I'm gonna punt and go to the other side because I think you're spot on, which is there are so many areas that we can actually be very, very helpful in, and we haven't talked about these areas, but broadly in the healthcare space, the ability to do objective measurement of pain, really, so over a period of time, be able to measure people's pain level better than, for instance, a nurse can. So this kind of when you think about nurses saying, well, is it a 4? Yeah. Is it a 7? What is it? I mean, to be able to make a more objective assessment, that's what objective assessment of depression, bipolar, PTSD, building that kind of capability into places that are really valuable. Having the ability. One of the companies that I happen to be an investor on a board of. Is the iPad Surface company in the NFL. The whole concussion thing. You could pull up an iPad to somebody and put them in a simple protocol and quickly assess, red, green, is somebody, able to go back into the game or not? I mean, there are really very, very practical, valuable applications that we have to get to.
I'm going to push you guys a little bit more, though, by talking about the good applications. That's not saying that the potential world, which is where a lot of you guys are playing right now around kind of improved efficacy of virality or advertising, doesn't have this potentially darker side. And the same way that maybe Yuval pointed out, hey, maybe we come up and create standards for measurements, for metrics, for whatever in our APIs, how do we come together and address those concerns with your technology? Or is this so far away? Right now, we're all barely, we're trying to boil the ocean. We're not worried about what happens when the ocean evaporates.
No, I think we as a company have a lot of conversation around, content and how, what happens when you understand an emotional profile of a person. Like, you know that I like sentimental content, but maybe you like humorous content, right? Yeah. And I think at the end, you want to match people to stuff they want to see. Mm-hmm. And this is an opportunity to use this data to kind of not dish you content that's just wasting your time. I think there's a lot of that, and we're sick of that. So that's one.
So I think that, like you were alluding, I think that we have the responsibility. I know that, for example, one of the reasons we are not opening the API to the whole public and giving people access to it to do whatever they want is because we want to vet, even though we are still a very small company, we want to vet the different use cases to make sure that they meet the standards that we think are the right ones. And especially at the beginning, some people can take it in such a wrong direction that I think it can create a very big damage for the whole industry. So I think we have the responsibility, and I think that a lot of the players in this space that I'm talking with are very aware of this. So they are all kind of putting the right processes in place.
But it's a risk.
It is.
It's a risk, Zavain. It's absolutely a risk because, the people that we work with and that we sell our capability to, theoretically can take that information and correlate it with a lot of other data that we don't control. And so, yes, it's a risk.
They would love the world where for every ad and every kid who sees it, that kid buys whatever's on the ad, right? Great. I think we have one last audience question, and then we have a presentation from Ken. The audience question is actually about sensing differences in emotional distributions across cultures. And particularly, I guess, I'm not sure how much real field or out in the wild data Mary has access to at MSR, but you three are all deployed in like live settings.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
I actually did a study of intercultural, the way people see emotional words and how they relate them to each other. And actually, we saw really strong cultural differences. The US versus China versus India, for instance. So their cognitive space about how they even think of emotional words is very different. So I don't know, maybe you have similar stories?
Yeah.
We've collected data from over 75 countries. So we found that, for example, people in Brazil are more expressive than people in Southeast Asia. What I found especially fascinating is that we looked at gender differences as well, and found something that we kind of all suspected, that women are more emotive or expressive than men, but these differ by country. So in the US, women are 40% more, they express or smile 40% more than men. In the UK, there's almost no difference between men and women.
No one is
kind of
smiling.
interesting.
Yeah. So, and we've noticed a similar, for whatever reason, women tend to be have a more positive sentiment at the sporting events that we track than men. And we don't understand that yet,
Right.
but generally that's what the data shows. The other thing, a couple of our researchers are pretty big robotics folks, Dr. Javier Movilan and Dr. Ian Faisal, and they've spent a lot of time in Japan, so we have a lot of data from there. And one of the interesting things, there are sort of subcultural nuances. Once you get past the 7 basic emotions and you get deeper into a particular culture, and generally the Japanese people will tend to work hard to show less emotion. I think you all understand that. One of the interesting things was that though, if you put, at least in our work, when you put a Japanese person, at least in these studies, in a setting where they did not believe that they were being observed, they were much more emotive. It was an interesting. So it's actually a sort of a cultural norm or peer pressure about not expressing emotion. It's not necessarily that they don't express it.
Not innate.
Yes.
That's, by the way, what happened to the audience the minute you said that you are recording. So one quick perspective. We have a tool that we call a mood of the world, where we basically, because we are collecting all this information from different countries, we can put this in our database and really show kind of what cultural differences are between different countries. And it's, of course, it's completely anonymized, but when you start to aggregate the information, you get some really interesting insights about the differences between China and Germany and the UK. And for example, we've seen, last piece of information, but when the Mondial took place, and you could really see the effect of different results on what's happening in different countries. So it was very
Everyone
interesting.
gets really depressed on April 15th. Ken, I believe you have a demo for us.
Yeah, we do. It's my colleague, Steve Ritter is with us. Steve's the Senior Vice President of Engineering and Software Development at our shop, and phenomenal talent. We're really, really happy to have him. And Steve is going to go ahead and fire up the results of a small segment of the video, and some of you will see yourselves on camera. You would be very nervous if I were over there. You should be. Yeah. Is that mic live over there?
Because, no. Is it easy to turn this mic on?
There's more joy than anything.
Yeah.
That's a good sign.
Because context is everything here, right?
Yeah, Steve was saying context is everything, so he needs to give you some context.
Is this mic on? Yes.
In terms of what was going on at the
time.
time.
All right, so 2 days ago I was asked to do a live demo, so any of you in this room that have been in that position know how I was feeling while I was doing this. So it worked, yay. So this segment right here is during Yuval's talk, and it's really the first couple points. Sorry, Yuval. So, I'm sorry, I keep walking away. While this was happening, I was taking some notes to time code the event. And what you can see at the bottom is over time, you can see the measurement of all of the different expressions. And this is a frame-by-frame aggregate of the results of every face. And so roughly about a minute in, which is where I have the video queued up to, Yuval told a joke about his wife in a basketball game. And then about, that continued into the vignette about a baby. Sorry, I was taking notes. I wasn't paying too much attention. And so you can see the emotion kind of, it actually stayed pretty high. That was a pretty engaging story that Yuval told there. And at about 2:45, you can see another spike, and that was some joke where Obama was on screen. I forget the context. And then right around 4 minutes, 4:10, there was some recognition of English versus Hebrew joke as well. So there's another spike there. So I'll play a little bit just so you can see what we got here. And forgive, we got my downlink's not good. And this is playing right out of our cloud. And so you can see over time, right, people's expressions. You see the little spot, little burst of joy. Right? And that's really it.
Yeah. So yeah, we could let it run, but it would be probably too long. But the point is that measuring, doing aggregate analysis across the group gives us a lot of signal on multiple sides, and this is the kind of thing that we can do to measure either live presentations or digital content and get very detailed, literally frame by frame on every single frame. At 30 frames a second, we are taking a score on every single face in the field of view. So you think about that's a lot of data. When all the 7 expressions plus more complex ones plus action units. So that's a lot of data. So that's the.
So how do I get a copy?
Yeah. So what Steve is showing you are some of the macro summary level, and then there's lots of amazing detail behind it. And I will give you a copy. We'll make sure you get a copy. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Steve.
So last question, each of you, in 20 seconds or less, or 30 seconds or less, advice for entrepreneurs, where you guys were 3 years ago. Looking back, what would you have told yourselves? Marry yourself to, as someone who's really pioneering and leading the field. Why don't we start with you?
Okay. Well, I would just tell an entrepreneur to don't get too focused on the technology and make sure that you're really solving a real user problem that adds value.
Very great advice. My comment along the same lines is really understand that last 20 feet of the value proposition. So by that, it's 20 to 50 feet. But that means how are you going to deliver value to your customer? How are you going to increase their revenue? Specifically, what will they get from the technology or the solution you're delivering, and how will they implement? Sometimes we think if we just give people insights, that's enough. And it's often not enough. They have to take those insights and do something with them. And you have to be able to demonstrate to them, take them by the hand and show them exactly how they get that increment of value. If you stop too early, you're going to sub-optimize.
Okay, so for me, it's have passion and ignore the naysayers. You're going to run into a lot of people, including VCs, who will not get it. And just ignore them, move on, keep at it.
Haters gonna hate. Right, Yuval.
So along the same lines, my advice would be you would get a lot of conflicting advice on the very same question when you ask a variety of people. So it's always important to talk with people, that you appreciate people in the industry, but at the end you need to develop your own gut feeling and just go with the gut feeling, because you will have to live with the results, and all the people around you that are saying very conflicting things, they will not.
Perfect. With that, a round of applause for the panelists.